So how do you think about, before we move on to some other topics, how do you think about investing in this space then? In terms of, allocation, what percentage you think about and how?
I mean, I don't think so much in terms of percentages. I've got the stocks that I've owned for years now, basically.
Yeah.
In March, when things kind of cratered, I bought some more stuff and I've sold some of that since. And then I invest in private companies like the things we're talking about, because I think that's where the greatest return comes.
But what about crypto itself? How do you think about your allocation to crypto?
Allocation to crypto, I've been accumulating over the years and I've just never sold. I've swapped out some for Aave recently. So so the way I look at it is, where can something go? And so I had a bunch of Ethereum from when it first came out, or not, about a year after it came out. And then I bought some more, a few months ago. I forget how many, 6, 7 months ago, whatever. And I bought Litecoin, LTC. And then recently, because I wanted to understand DeFi more, I bought a bunch of Aave and I staked a bunch of it. And I also bought some Sushi Swap. And since I did stuff on Rarible, now I have Rari tokens and I'll see what happens with that. So I'm not looking to trade in and out. So I'm not a day trader at all. That just takes too much work. And I don't, there's a lot of narrative stories that go on with tokens right now where, oh, this is going to be this and this is going to be that. And there's a couple of them I bought where I said, okay, I'm going to put in $10,000 and just for shits and giggles, but I'm not going to tell you which ones they are because I don't want to be yelled at. I don't really have an investment strategy. It's like I've got a lot, every time they list the whale list, let's just say, my private wallets that everybody else, thank God, doesn't have after some of them came out or one of them came out. I'm in that. So it's big enough to be on those lists, but I have no interest in selling them. I mean, they've grown, done well. And
so you're thinking of like VC, you're just putting some bets across the space, reasonable size, and let it develop and see how it goes.
Yeah, I mean, and it actually wasn't so much bets. It was more, how can I learn and have enough skin in the game? It's kind of like going to a blackjack table. If I bet $5, I'm bored, right? And so it's just, and I want to learn about it and understand API, the yield farming and DeFi and all that stuff. And so I've messed with it some and I track it, but I'm not, if Bitcoin craters, then I would buy more, right? If Ethereum goes back under 1,000, then I'll buy more, right? But I'm not out there chasing it.
So I want to move on a bit to the more public markets now. Stuff like the valuation of tech, of big tech, is pretty high because of interest rates, as you've talked about, and where else do people put capital? How are you thinking through that? Because it feels like you need, for some of these big companies to double from here, needs a tectonic shift in something because the valuation's so crazy.
Yes and no. I'll tell you why. I mean, two of my biggest holdings my two biggest holdings are Amazon and Netflix. Yep. And they have been for years. And the reason I stay with them is, to me, if you go through that list, FANG and Microsoft and whoever else you want to put on there as the biggest valuations, the one common thread that they have is, one, they've been doing AI for a decade in many cases, and two, they're really good at it. And that is the differentiator. I don't look at it and say, oh, what is Amazon going to get into next and what can their sales go to, right? Or the same with Microsoft. I look at it and say, are these guys great at AI? Yeah. And who else is good at AI? And the AI haves are this many, and the AI have-nots is everybody else.
Because it's impossible to do. It's so expensive. It takes so much knowledge.
AI is hard to do right. It's not, I compare it to the dawn of the internet age, but it's more like blockchain, right? Blockchain is hard to do right and to get adoption and to consumerize it. And, AI is even harder to do right because you've got to be able to afford to make mistakes. You've got to go through the learning process of what is impactful and what's not. If you're Google and Amazon, you have research groups and you're hiring, and it's hard to hire all the right people. And if this country doesn't get a lot more AI engineers, we're going to fall behind other countries at some point. But that's how I look at my investment strategy for those companies and why I stick with them. So if you're not a great AI company, I have no interest in being a big investor.
Yeah, because that is a huge moat. I mean, It's really difficult to compete.
And that goes, okay, so how does this tie back to Wall Street bets, right? Because when I'm looking at potential investments, I get so many deals pitched to me, oh, AI. And I've spent enough time learning and doing tutorials and all that shit to understand it, right? Reading research papers, all that stuff, because I'm a geek. And 99% of those pitches are bullshit, right? Oh, this guy was at MIT and he was the best at this. And then you ask a couple questions and it's a spreadsheet. And when you look at it and you realize how hard it is, then, it's like there's just a few people that are doing it. But you know who doesn't understand it? Because there's people investing in those deals that I'm getting pitched that are bullshit. Traditional Wall Street. They don't get all that stuff. Not that the Wall Street bettors understand it inherently, right? The digital generation still doesn't understand AI, right? It's still hard. And it's not like they're using that as an investment criteria that I'm aware of, but traditional Wall Street doesn't at all. And so when they're talking about bets and they're looking at this company versus this company and how can the FANGs go up to be from 1 trillion in valuation to 1.6 in multiple months, when that's more increase, that's that $600 billion delta is more than 90% of the S&P 500. AI. And AI isn't just about what new products are you going to create. That's probably the smallest amount. I invested in these 16-year-old kids, a company called Price Stack. He was the son of an old friend of mine. And he came to me and said, okay, we've got this AI starting with machine learning that's going to integrate into Shopify that'll automatically, based off of these data sets that we're able to collect and normalize and check, tell companies how to price the products that they're putting for sale on their Shopify site. And I'm like, oh, yes.
16 years old.
Yes, now they're 18. Right? Yes. And a better part is it works. Now we're trying to come up with ways to make it self-service. And when I talk about the difference between the AI haves and AI have-nots, Amazon knows exactly how to price. Walmart knows exactly how to price. The little guy just working has no clue how to price. And this company, if they get any traction at all, Spotify has to buy them because if Big Commerce buys them, right, Spotify's torched. And so those are the types of things the AI haves are dominating, and Wall Street hasn't fully comprehended the impact of AI on what happens behind the scenes. I talked to somebody at one of the FANG companies who told me that it added $9 billion in revenue in 1 quarter because they were able to use AI. Now, that also has a negative component because look at what Facebook does with AI to try to, promote different viewpoints, right? Just to maximize revenue. And so, we can argue, and I think Roger McNamee said it best, that if you algorithmically promote any content, it should not get 230 protections, right? Because it's not just somebody putting something out there, it's you promoting it. And so there's a negative side of that we have to be aware of as well. And then there's a government side of it, there's defense. If we don't win AI, we're stuck, and same with robotics and, just AI is that massive, that impactful. And if you're going to invest, you better have a strong concept and understanding of it, or you're going to make mistakes.
That's a super interesting way of looking at it. Also, it creates this black hole, right? The people with the most AI win everything. Or they buy everybody.
Exactly what's happening. It's like that giant sucking sound are a bunch of neural networks sucking, valuation away from other companies towards these big AI companies.